Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today's session is going to overwhelm you. So grab a cup of coffee, buckle your seatbelt, because in this session, we are going to analyze some of the petitions deposited at the UN from 1995 to 2021 by leaders from the Southern Cameroons and Ambazonia. In this session, you are going to learn why the world has ignored us for more than 65 years. We are also going to look at the US foreign policy, because people have asked the question, why is it that the elections are being rigged in Cameroon and the world stays quiet? We are going to address that in this video as well. We are going to have Molanjo Litumbe, Cho Ayaba, Seseko Ayoktabe, and other leaders from the Southern Cameroons in this conversation. We will also give you a hint of the case file we are building against La République du Cameroon. By the time we are done with this case, La République du Cameroon will be begging to run, and we will say, no, wait here. You said you own Southern Cameroons. Isn't that true? Do you have any document that gave you jurisdiction over Southern Cameroon? No. And if the answer is no, why did you extend your administration into this territory without a signed union treaty? Do you understand? Go ahead, click the subscribe button, so that every time a video is uploaded, you will be notified. Make sure you share this video with a friend and a loved one. That is how we unite as one, and we will become unstoppable. And our goal is to make Africa safe for democracy, make Southern Cameroons safe for democracy, make Cameroon safe for democracy, for trade, and for worship. That is why we do what we do here. To defy the status quo and make life livable for our people. There are also some questions that we will address. Some people ask, wasn't it the responsibility of the UN to follow through to make sure that everything went smooth in the Southern Cameroon? So we are going to address that as well. So let's go ahead and start with this video from Chris Arno. Let's take a listen.
You waste your time. The so-called international community, it's a facade that doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. If the international community exists, how come Cameroon soldiers have killed over 30,000 people in the Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia? If the international community exists, if the international community exists, why are there over 100,000 Ambazonians languishing in foreign countries around Nigeria, Gabon, and the rest of the places? Why? Where is it? If the international community exists, why are there over 900,000 internally displaced, they call it, in Cameroon? If the international community exists, where are they when Paul Biya rigged elections at 93 years? At 93 years, he rigged elections, and they rushed to him to congratulate him. They rushed to him to congratulate him. So-called international community is a facade. It's a scam that they use to, pacify you to keep believing.
My people, If you look across every social media platform, all our leaders are charged with emotions. Again, we are not blaming anyone. We make adjustments from here moving forward and get to tell a different story. So whatever we are analyzing, do not blame an individual. These are ideas that have been in our communities, running our lives for hundreds of years. And we are bringing an end to that. Now, this is what I want you to pay attention to. Mr. Chris Anu raised some serious concerns. I'm sure you are asking or demanding for answers to these questions. Now, let's look at the United States foreign policy. These countries you see, especially the Western nations, they are built on frameworks. They are built on laws. That is why you see they are reliable. And these principles have served these nations for hundreds of years. So our screaming and our shouting will not get them to bend because we are feeling pain. You see, when we come over here to America, you go learn how to drive. For those who did not know how to drive back home. When you meet a stop sign, or when the light turns red, you stop. When it turns green, you go. That is a standard procedure. When you come here, you learn and then you adapt. You won't say, oh, I come from Southern Cameroons. We don't have that over there. So I want you to change everything to suit what I'm used to. We learn, then we adapt. So if you don't study the system, you will get frustrated your entire life. Now, the United States have a foreign policy. And when you study that policy and you see their actions, you will not be angry. And let me clear the air with that to start with. Okay, so they will empathize, but they don't act on emotions. That's number one. Write it down. So the US, they listen to human suffering. Remember, the Judea worldview is what built this nation. So they will issue statements of concern. They may call for dialogue. If you've seen Tibor Nagy came here, he has never said what I taught us about the frameworks of the crisis that we are dealing with in Southern Cameroons. He will never say that. Even if he knows it, he won't say that. Because they have frameworks. And a diplomat knows their job title, job description, and they will never go out of that. So they may call for dialogue, ceasefire, respect for human rights. They will always release statements on that. But empathy alone never drives their policy. They follow their framework and not emotions. So what do they do next? They will always throw out statements like that. And what do they do next? They will always check their guardrails before moving. So the US foreign policy is built on 4 guardrails. International law. Is there a treaty? They'll ask that question. Is there a legal identity? They'll ask that question. Is there a recognized territory? They will ask those questions. What is the UN's position? They will ask questions like that. Number 2, regional relationship. What position does the African Union take? So when you say, oh, they called and appreciated Paul Biya for his victory, there was a framework they followed. While you're shouting, oh, this is injustice, no, they are following a framework that has not failed them for hundreds of years. We are trying to get them to change on something that is not reliable. First of all, our story, our framework has not been consistent. Even the frameworks that our people used to formulate their arguments about Southern Cameroons is inaccurate if you benchmark that with the reality of Southern Cameroons. So, regional leadership. What position does the African Union take? They'll ask that. What does Nigeria say? Like, they'll look at what Nigeria is saying. Because of the size of Nigeria's economy, and then ECOWAS influence, they'll ask things like that. Number 4, colonial and strategic alliance. What is France saying? What does the EU say? Are they in alignment, or is there conflict in their stance? This is what the United States observes before they make a decision. Now, let me make sure that I help us understand this. We have been using a social science approach to solve our problems. Most developed nations, they use natural science. For those who studied, at least if you've completed class 7, you will not miss this. And we are also going to use a PhD defense strategy to help us have perspective on this. For those who went to class 7, at least, you wrote the common entrance. That is at primary 6 or class 7. There is a framework in mathematics called BODMAS. That is a framework. We don't debate that. We use all these formulas where we have to debate to arrive at a certain decision. The West doesn't do that. 1 + 1 is true in Southern Cameroons. 1 + 1 is true in the United States of America. So they lean more towards these calculations to solve their problems. Not about how people feel and their emotions, because that is predictable. That is why you see the Chinese Communist Party has more of engineers than people from the social science department. With that, they can measure growth and measure progress. 30 centimeters is 30 centimeters. We don't have debate. BODMAS is a framework in mathematics that we all agree on. There is no argument. My goal is that we have a mathematical framework to solve our problem, that there is no debate. Now we should be debating on which direction we want to go to build rapidly. That is my goal with this. So with BODMAS, we have a framework that is reliable. Bracket of multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. No one debates that. For those who have completed primary 6 or class 7, you know this framework. There is no debate. So, the United States will look at this colonial strategy. Also, they will look at a risk to stability. Will intervention create more chaos? Those are questions they will ask. And they do that. So they are not guessing. Will it trigger refugee flow? That is, if we get involved, are we going to have more refugees in Nigeria? For instance, Cameroon was in this state of chaos. If we get involved right now and the country becomes unstable, that means Nigeria will have more refugees. Other surrounding nations around Cameroon will have refugees from Cameroon running into that nation. And that is cost for them. That is creating more problems in that area. Are you understanding? Ambazonia has been going on for 9 years. We already have refugees in Nigeria. Now, they will also ask, is this going to empower extremist groups like people that have certain ideas or ideologies? Are we going to empower them if we come in? Groups like Boko Haram, ISIS, the Al-Shabaab, are we going to empower this group? So until these 4 boxes are clear, the US will not move. So the United States typically waits for regional actors to speak first. And that is what they did towards this election. We don't know that. We just saw Marco Rubio called the Unity Palace. And we are all like, yeah, you see what I'm saying? They don't work like that. And that is why I trust that we will go on to build the first world nation. Because almost every community in Africa acts this way. This pattern is predictable. So we've studied almost every nation around Africa, specifically those nations with conflict. The patterns are the same. We must offset this, because we will start doing things differently. Those with skills in journalism, start learning something in the fields of science or maybe technology. It will help make your job better as we build this nation. This is just a hint for you, because we can't go on like this. We have to offset this paradigm. So this is their doctrine. Africa must lead on African problems. We wanted independence, not dependence. Go look at what we were clamoring for in the 1950s and 1960s, that we want to be able to handle our own affairs and be in charge of our destiny. Never forget that. So when you are disagreeing with your brother in the community and you think you go call a white man and all of a sudden you'll be the next boss among your people, never forget that we demanded independence, that we wanted to be able to be in charge of our affairs. So they will watch the AU Peace Security Council, ECOWAS position, which is led by Nigeria, ACA's positions, that is the CEMAC, the Central Africa Chad area. They will also look at neighboring countries like Nigeria. Like today, our people still say Southern Cameroons was a country, whereas Southern Cameroons was a nation, a UN trust territory. If you say 2 nations came together, that is accurate. If you say 2 countries come together, that is completely something different. A country must have an army and be able to carry out their foreign affairs. Southern Cameroons never had that. So if you say 2 nations came together, that is accurate. And you see why I'm insisting that we stop speaking in pidgin English, because this really affects us. Sometimes I look at even the petitions our people fight at the UN. We struggle because English is really a language we use officially in special events. It's not something we use in our day-to-day life. So it's hard to even interpret our own problems accurately because of these challenges. So I'm not saying this because, oh, I want you to change so that we can prosper. So if the AU says this is a domestic matter, the US slows down. Now, if the AU says this is a decolonization matter, the US moves faster. So because we did not even frame the issue in the Southern Cameroons as a decolonization matter, even the African Union, the US, and the UN sees us differently. Now, let me help you understand what I'm doing here. Just that name, Southern Cameroons, and everything that comes with it, it's like starting life with an inheritance in your name that you're not conscious of. You have money in the bank. You have friends that know you. You have business partners that you can activate just by understanding your status as Southern Cameroons and placing that on the table, which is what I did. With no emotion, clarity, following a framework. Talking about the mathematical equation that I cited, for those who have at least completed class 7. If you start with addition, when the equation placed before you has brackets, there is a high chance you won't get that answer correct. The teacher has no emotions. He will understand where you failed. And he will say, repeat that question, give you correction. So if we frame our case to the UN, we say, oh, if you say somebody talked about the Union Treaty that was missing, but they go on to talk about Ambazonia, that is like you solving that mathematical equation without starting with the bracket of division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. You have to follow that order. Now, I remember when I was in my MBA program, there was a class on behavioral finance. My professor was a white woman. I wrote a paper on that course, and the woman kept telling me, you haven't done the right thing. I felt frustrated at some point because the deadline was very close. I started feeling, is it because I'm black, because I'm African, this woman wants me to fail this class? Because when we feel like things are not going the way we want, the first tendency is to revert to the idea that these people have never liked us, so they probably want us to fail. She said, go back and read the instructions. I went and read the instructions. The question required 3 reliable sources that I had to cite on that paper. That is, you must cite 3 reliable sources and also use an example in the real world. I had just 2 citations, and my example was not that of the real world, because the previous questions that I've been answering on that course did not have a similar structure. I would have failed that course because instinctively I felt this was a woman that was prejudiced towards black people. But if you clear your mind from this kind of thinking, you will make progress rapidly in the world. Everything is not about race and color of your skin. So I think you've had perspective on how the U.S. foreign policy works. So they will do that. And then number 4, they will listen to France because Cameroon is a francophone sphere. The language Cameroonians predominantly speak is French. And France has influence over Cameroon. And so is most French-speaking countries in Africa. They will look whether France has historical leverage in Cameroon. They will look into that. U.S. intelligence respects France's network in the region. So the U.S. intelligence respects France's network in the region. The U.S. rarely takes a hostile stance against France's position unless France is violating international norms. That is why Southern Cameroons already helps us to cross this bridge. This is how I look at things. So Washington looks at Paris before taking a bold stand. When you understand things like this, my brother, the energy to be pushing, you slow down. A classic example is the case of Nnamdi Kanu. He was given life sentence. This is a man representing the entire Igbo clan. Biafra went into court to defend himself, not understanding that you will be emotional. That is why you get a lawyer, so that you just take off that emotion, take off that stress, because you must be emotional if you are defending yourself. I'm not just looking at the situation and saying that court was unjust. I looked at how he handles himself in court. Let us learn from this. So, the U.S. prefers policy based on principle, not personalities. So, U.S. diplomats work based on consistency, precedent, international law, long-term stability. So even if they see injustice, they ask, what does the law say? Who has jurisdiction? What is the documented status of this territory? This is why our argument of Resolution 1608, Article 102, Article 76B, and the trusteeship law is powerful. This gives the United States, the UN, and every other country in the world clarity on our status. Instantly, we have international recognition. So, when a legal case becomes clear, if there is clarity, that is, no union treaty exists, a trust territories decolonization was never completed, the state is occupied illegally, then the State Department can act without contradicting its own principles. The world works on laws. And that leads to the question someone asked. The UN should have solved this problem. They understand what we are going through. My people, we asked for independence. This world wants us to cooperate, even for the betterment of our own lives. And it's in that process of cooperation that we learn and make ourselves competent. right? You see, just like the studies I've done on our case, all this has elevated us already. And after this, anyone that wants to practice law within Southern Cameroons, they will reference this case. After we are done with this case will be taught in universities across Africa as a case study of what has happened in the Southern Cameroons for more than 65 years. It will be taught in international universities around the world. So we are not just here playing this kind of emotional game. Do you understand? We wanted independence. So if the United Nations acknowledged the result of the plebiscite, and then they issue a document called Resolution 1608 that outlines the structure on how that union will be formed. And then Yaoundé, Southern Cameroons, and Britain doesn't obey that. We go ahead and we build a case based on that. We don't go on to say they seceded from a union. Just go listen to what everyone is saying in the community. After this, we should have one language on this case across Southern Cameroons. You are not a Cameroonian by legitimacy. You are a Cameroonian by learned acceptance. And you will hear prominent leaders from our community speaking the same on this issue. And it's not clear before the world. So we are going to go ahead and listen some more. But trust me, this session will open your eyes and it will take you to a whole new next level.
You to keep believing.
Most francophones send your children to anglophone schools, and one doesn't even need to argue about it, because it makes sense to send children to anglophone schools because it has more potential. It's their possibility to have a job later is larger. So as a consequence, you have the future that's already taken by that population of youngsters who are 10 years old, who are 12, 15 years old, and who in the future are going to be Anglophones. So it doesn't make any sense to declare war against those who are Anglophones when your own children actually are becoming Anglophones.
Well, it does seem nonsense. That's true.
The Republic of Nigeria became independent from Great Britain.
That is a very important point that brother highlighted. You will see in Cameroon, ministers, even the president, they send their children to Anglophone schools. And then you ask the question, for those who say Paul Biya is wise, for 43 years, you've been trying to turn Anglophones to become Francophones. What is the rationale behind such actions? Does that make you smart? Some Anglophones are trying to reason on what Paul Biya is doing. That kind of a human being is the worst Anglophone you can ever think of. You need serious prayers and deliverance. And one thing I want to let the Francophones understand, there is a difference between Anglophone and the English culture. You can learn how to speak English, but that doesn't make you an English man. Now, You can send your children to an English speaking school, but that alone will never make them English people. And it will never give them the English culture. I see some travel to America and they speak English now, but you go into their communities, after they are done with their jobs, they come back and they practice the exact Francophone culture that you see back home in Cameroon. They do this even in churches. There are some Anglophones that travel too from Cameroon, come here and try to practice the same archaic culture that we've adopted from the Francophones. That is not how you experience transformation in a first world nation like this. You have to dial into the culture. So speaking English is simply a tool. The culture is the discipline. It is the way of thinking, because I put an idea before you, just like we did not sign a union treaty. That means we did not legally join. So the extension of La République's administration into Southern Cameroons is illegal and violates international law, because the extension of their administration was without UN's approval. If we establish a foundation like this and we understand law, there should be no debate between us and those of La République du Cameroun on this issue. Because even the UN will say yes when we put it this way. The United States will say yes when we put it this way. And then we show them what the resolution 1608 said. It wasn't obeyed. And so we go on to show them this is the framework. No one should have a debate. If we debate, then we are corrupt instantly. This is what English culture comes with. This level of precision. My people, the world has been running on English for 300 years. The major sectors, diplomacy, business, trade, science, technology, has been running on English for the past 300 years. That is before La République du Cameroun got their independence. Before our incomplete decolonization, English has been running the world. Every institution, from law to international politics, is on English. The UN is on English. So English is the culture. It's a culture. It's a way of organizing society that it gets to work. And we relieve ourselves from stress because we have systems that work. It's a set of values that guide how people solve problems in society, build institutions, and shape the future. So a child can attend the best English schools, modernize their grammar, speak with a perfect accent, even get top grades. But if the underlying mindset at home has not changed, the culture will not change. So you can borrow the language of another society without adopting the habits that made that society strong. That is why many people speak English yet struggle to produce the outcomes associated with English institutions. That is the rule of law, documentation, contracts, accountability, innovation, productivity, and trust-based systems. So before we dive into Ayok Sesekotabe, and then we will look at what our people have been writing to the UN. When I look at someone like President Paul Biya, in as much as we are fighting based on my Christian values, even though we are having disagreements, I will always respect people's humanity, even those who are in prison. the diabolic decisions Paul Biya has been making. I will respect their humanity, but I will help them find the light, even while I do so. So before you tell me I should dialogue with Paul Biya, of which I've made it clear we shouldn't ever dialogue with Paul Biya. Cameroon doesn't have jurisdiction. They don't have the jurisdictional power over this case. The UK and the UN. If there is anything I should dialogue with Paul Biya about, is to help him understand how to treat even his own people right, how to live with other human beings in society. That is what I'll get to teach him, not dialogue with him, Paul Biya, and all those who are running after him. Now, this is what I want you to understand, my people, with all humility. A suit and a tie doesn't create wisdom. When I look at the actions of Paul Biya for the past 43 years, I will not assume dialogue with him. Because before you talk about dialogue, the individual you want to dialogue with, do they have the reasoning capacity to have constructive conversation about the issue or the subject matter? You must consider that. So a suit and a tie doesn't create wisdom. A title does not create competence. And history has shown us that you cannot look at someone who comes from a system built on violence, fear, and force, like the legacy of La République du Cameroon. Since the UPC era, these people murdered more than 300,000 Bamileke people. This is what we got ourselves involved in. Thank God there is no union treaty. This culture of La République du Cameroon is cannibalistic by nature. So we assume they understand how a modern society functions. That assumption is how entire nations get trapped in a cycle of chaos. The fact that we believe that some fruitful result can come out of dialogue with Paul Biya keeps us in this cycle. And so we scream on social media about what is going on in La République du Cameroon. Does Paul Biya have the reasoning capacity to understand what a modern society is all about? This has nothing to do with insulting somebody. Your actions will tell me if you have the reasoning capacity. And that is what I have understood. So the starting point is education, not dialogue. You educate him, they watch our videos. You educate them through contents like this. Educate their people, the young men who rush in there, pick up a gun and say they are an army. Because some of them are worse than even the Paul Biya. Because that is the only thing you are scared of. That military, the gun. We don't give a gun to someone like that or have someone control a military that thinks at that level. So dialogue is overrated when one side lacks the reasoning capacity to understand the purpose of human coexistence. So competence is underrated because it is competence not emotion, not title, not costumes that builds a nation. Do you understand? Before you sit across a table with someone, you must first fill the gap created by ignorance, cowardice, compromise, and justification. This is the 4-pillar framework I created for conflict resolution. So these 4 are the engines of underdevelopment. You can only elevate someone from that status to the next if you have a firm understanding on these 4 pillars. So when people don't know, they fear, they avoid responsibility. And when they avoid responsibility, they justify destruction. So the first duty is to teach. You teach them what it means to be a human primate, a social being who survives and flourishes only through cooperation, trust, and shared values. You teach them that. You show them why humanity created contracts and why successful nations honor those contracts. You explain why English-speaking nations flourish. You have to explain this to our Francophone counterparts. Because if not, all of us want to fight. No, calm down. Stop. That's madness. And listen. And I've seen most of our people have grown into this culture. There was a time I was talking with a brother from Kondengi prison. The arrogance in his tone. And I'm like, brother, you don't need help from me. It feels as though you are doing better than me from your tone. The United Nations will give instruction. We say they had to run after us. My brother, when you go to the hospital, the doctor gives you medication and say, hey, take this medication in the morning and in the evening. Do not drink alcohol. After 2 weeks, come back for another checkup. Brother, does the doctor runs after you to make sure that you're doing the right thing? No. You have to play your own part. While the doctor plays his own part, that is how you get your healing. So the United Nations gave you your own part. If you don't play that part, you can't blame them. Foncha came to the UN in 1995. When they did not sign a union treaty in 1961. Think about it. They have to run after you. They know what they had to do. No, they told you what you had to do. If you go and decide not to drink that medication the way the doctor prescribed, you decide to continue drinking alcohol, the medication won't work. And if you don't show up for that checkup, you don't have to blame the doctor. If we didn't do our own part, because that is what baffles me. I want to make sure that we did everything that was required so that when we place our case on the table and then we don't get what we want, then we will know. God created this world and gave us free will. So we must cooperate to make things work. Even Jesus asked, what can I do for you? You will hear that and think, say what you want. No, that is not enough. We that have studied theology to a certain level steps back and ask, This is the creator of heaven and earth who made this human being, because Jesus Christ became human. The word became flesh and dwelt among us. So this Jesus we are talking about knows us. He knows the thought. The Bible says whatever is in your mind, God knows. And yet he asks, what do you want me to do for you? We baffle at statements like that because it helps us establish that framework of partnership between God and humans, the free will God has given you to even accept him or reject him. We can see that manifesting. You have the free will to reject the resolution 1608 and pick up a different course. And it's a choice. What do you want me to do for you? Brother, this world is all about cooperation. Even a newborn child must cooperate to have their own food. If not, you say, oh, didn't the mother know the child was hungry? That after 2 hours you have to breastfeed a newborn baby? No. The baby screams. That is cooperation. Maybe you don't understand these things. They're happening all before you. Oh, the UN had to know the baby don't wait for that. The baby had to scream like, and you're like, oh, that child hasn't eaten. The mom knows. Women understand this. So you must cooperate. Now you're grown. How do you cooperate? Especially the demand for independence. How do we show ourselves as independent people? By following basic instructions on how to form a union and participate in that process. Make sure we take that responsibility with pride and make sure we go through the paperwork, study it. Do you understand? So when you see people like the government of La Republique de Cameroon, what they have done even with their own people for time memorial, you teach them, you call Paul Biya, you bring Paul Biya close, the ministers surrounding him, the head of defense or the secretary, and teach them that a military is not a tool for terrorizing civilians, but an instrument for protecting the social contract between the state and the people. You teach him that. He doesn't know. Always assume the individual doesn't know. Because when we see people in authority, we automatically assume that they know everything. No, they don't. The history of La Republique du Cameroon tells me they don't know. Their actions is inconsistent with someone that knows. So you teach them the difference between authority and abuse. Teach them. Between leadership and domination, you teach them that. So when you see Atangan Jipo running in there and trying to do, now you bring him close and then you teach him. He will teach his own colleagues or will teach his friends, and they will get to understand why other societies work and theirs don't. And every day they wake up to quench fire instead of building a nation. You teach them why honesty is not a moral decoration. Honesty is not a moral decoration, but a system for preserving long-term stability. You teach them to identify opportunity because they don't know the millions of smart Cameroonians that would have helped to take that entire country to the next level. They don't know how to identify opportunities. You teach them how to identify opportunities, not enemies. They go around looking for enemies and not opportunities. You teach them why the frameworks of the best nations on earth work. The rule of law, separation of powers. He has control over every sector that has to do with power. You teach him why there is separation of powers. You can't be the executive and at the same time be the head of the judiciary and the legislative. It is for a reason why these powers are separated in developed nations. You teach him that. You teach him the rule of law, separation of powers, economic freedom, institutional competence, and how these frameworks improve the well-being of every citizen in a country. This is what I would teach Paul Biya to help him manage the affairs of his own country. We don't hand power to people who have spent 65 years proving they don't understand these principles. Third war, authoritarian regime, dictatorship. You teach them that. So we re-educate. You don't say, oh, he studied public law in France in the 60s and so he knows better. No, you re-educate so that we can rebuild. We reset the foundations. Once competence is present, dialogue becomes meaningful. Let me repeat that slowly. When competence is present, dialogue becomes meaningful. Until then, dialogue is just theater. So the world moves forward through reason, structure, and clarity. You teach them this, not symbolic conversations. We had the grand national dialogue. What came out of that? Nothing. And some people still want dialogue. So you don't just go on to push symbolic conversations with people who have never learned how societies succeed. And 65 years of their leadership from Amadu Ahijo proves that. So step back and keep insisting that we go dialogue, and look at you insisting with dialogue with Paul Biya as though you have an issue. Again, they don't have jurisdictional power in the first place to solve our problem. It's illegal. Now, let's go ahead and listen to Ayok Siseko-Tabe. I don't want you to feel bad towards any of our leaders. They have tried. They have tried their best based on their understanding of this issue. We upgrade the vocabulary, bring in structure and framework so that the world hears us correctly. That is what we are doing here. This would have been like a conversation between me and these people so that we build a society with our mothers. They need clean drinking water. They need roads. The young people need schools. They can sell clothes and build a future. That is what is going on across the Anglophone zone as we speak. Our young people are dying every day. Do you understand? So we bring about solutions so we can be able to solve these problems. Let's take a listen.
As of that 1st of October, the small stretch of land from the north to south of the British Northern Cameroons and the British Southern Cameroons remain a trust territory of the United Nations. So on the 11th of February 61, this British Southern Cameroons was given a choice to vote in a plebiscite to either become independent by joining the French Republic of Cameroon or the British Federal Republic of Nigeria. These two nations had been independent before this day. So our people voted, and that's why I brought the story of they're moving away, because as of that moment, most of our forefathers asked why the choice of them being independent on their own was not given to them. But the British government at the time thought that they were too small to be independent. And they did that with the complicity of the United Nations. I say complicity because if we were too small to be independent, as we speak today, if we become independent tomorrow and change the United Nations configuration from 193 to 194 nations, we would be more populated than 94 of those countries. With a land surface of 43,000 square kilometers, we are actually a country bigger in size than Holland and Belgium and many, many countries. So let me come back now to the story. On the 11th of February, given those two choices, that your own independence would only be by joining the Republic of Cameroon or the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and knowing that in hindsight they had just left Nigeria a couple of years before, they were caught between a rock and a hot plate. So the only option they did, on a score of 60 to 40, they voted to go and join the Republic of Cameroon. Even at that, you have to see that the ratio, the victory wasn't so massive, because they had the scars of Nigeria. They couldn't go back. That was on the 11th of February. On the 12th of February, the British Northern Cameroons voted overwhelmingly to stay in Nigeria. Because you have to remember, up to this moment, they are still part of Nigeria. It's the British Southern Cameroons that left in 1954. But the condition of us joining the Republic of Cameroon was such that the two nations were asked to go into a conference, which for historical reasons is called the Fumban Conference. It is at the Fumban Conference where those two nations were going to come and iron out their constitution of the two nations and eventually become one nation. But what happened in that conference was very significant, because by the time our forefathers got to the conference, Mr. Ayijo, who was president of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, came with a pre-prepared constitution. And he said, well, you know, we have worked on this constitution, so we might as well adopt it. Thanks to the wisdom of our forefathers, they said, well, if you have worked on it, the least we can do is take it to our own parliament to be debated and accepted. All of this was happening in April of 1961. They took the constitution back home, and before they even had a time to debate it and accept it, 30th of September had caught them, and the United Nations had given Britain the 1st of October as a date when they had to hand over the independence of British Southern Cameroons. And without any preparation, the British invited Mr. Ayijo. He landed in Tico on the 30th of September 1961. And on the 1st of October, his military marched into our country, and they have taken over till today. I say this, that the British...
I want you to pay attention to how our story is being worded before diplomats. It is very, very important that you pay attention to the sequence. We are going to use a PhD defense framework. How you write a thesis to defend your PhD. Break it down and make it so easy that we don't miss it. But just listen to the sequence, because that is what international diplomats pay attention to, and then they understand what category to place your problem in. And this is one of the reasons why our problem in the Southern Cameroons has not made any progress, why the UN has been quiet about our issue. Keep listening. We'll have Che Ayaba on this same conversation. We'll have other leaders within the Southern Cameroons. This is education. And before we get into what our leaders have said before the UN, I will not disclose their names. but they know themselves. Some went, dropped a petition at the UN that there is no union treaty, rushed back home to campaign to become the president of Cameroon. Our people are interesting. But however, pay attention to the sequence, because that is what I'm following. Remember, BODMAS, bracket of division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. Never forget that formula for those who completed class 7, because this is the kind of society we'll build moving forward. 1 + 1 = 2. We don't have argument. Let's keep listening.
Invited Ahijo because we have on record the then French president saying in French, "Nous avons reçu un petit cadeau de la reine de l'Angleterre," which translates to say, "We have just received a small gift from the Queen of England."
Remember, it's all those conspiracies. Well, we've received a small gift from England. It's all those small conspiracies that has destroyed our society. We focus more on that. I just go with the facts. That is why you see it took me time to share some of my personal pain with you people, because I feel like it's not important, but again, it helps me connect. Before we listen to Cho Ayaba, I want to say this to our people. Each time I'm at that low stage in life, I'm the most humble person. The fact that we've gone through pain should make us humble and have an open mind to find solutions. Whether you are in prison, because I've talked with most of our people from prison. Some spoke with me a couple of days ago. Very polite, curious people, that is good. But some are so arrogant to continue in their ways that I look at it, I'm like, I can't help. Sorry. I feel your pain, but I can't help. But some speak in a way that I have empathy. I'm like, okay, we'll see what to do. Humility. Always assume you don't know. And when you reach out to me, my number is on the screen there. Have at least 2 or 3 questions to ask and listen. Let's develop a culture of asking questions. It doesn't make you look foolish. You learn and then you grow. The fact that we are where we are today is a classic indication that what we know is not sufficient. Not that people hate us. And who you listen to does matter. It doesn't matter who you are. The people that you listen to does matter. I throw my all into this, my people, and you don't understand. I shared with you my story. Do you know what it means that you fasted and prayed on the 6th day of that fast? Our wife had cooked food the previous night, and we know that we will be feasting and breaking that fast in the morning. I did not spend my time in the bar that night. I was reading the Word of God. I still carry the book I was reading that morning by Joseph Prince. This is the book and the Holy Bible. I was reading the Word of God that morning. I'm expecting the blessings of God that morning moving forward, because I believe I did the right thing. I wasn't sleeping. I was in the presence of God, and fire was burning my home. So when some of you say, why do bad things happen to us? Has God forgotten us? My people, I ask the same question. On the 6th day of that fast, I'm praying to God for blessings. I was not in the bar. I was at home that morning, and my house is burning. You ask all sorts of questions. And thank God He sent His people to help me have clarity. that even though I go through the fire, he's always with me. And within a week, we got everything we lost in that fire times 3. That is how God works if you trust him. Again, that is why I say I'm always in the will of God. So when my relative was kidnapped, I'm like, oh God, what are you up to? Every time there is a tragic event in my life, I know God is up to something big. So be humble in your downtime. And who you listen to does matter. There is a story in the Bible in the book of Numbers, chapter 13. Then we will move into Joab and then the PhD defense. 12 spies are sent into a land. A land God promised his people. They should go take a survey of that land and come back with a report so they can prepare themselves to inherit that land. These 12 spies return. Joshua and Caleb say, we can take the land. God is with us. The 10 spies say, the people are giants. We will die. We fell like grasshoppers in our own eyes and in the eyes of the people in that land. 10 people, 10 voices, 10 opinions. You see our community today, opinions everywhere, but I want to let you know, whoever you listen to will design your destiny. And the whole nation believed the wrong voice. The whole nation believed the wrong voice. Numbers 14 say, everyone who listened to the 10 died in the wilderness. Only Joshua and Caleb lived to enter the land. Never forget this. A majority can be wrong. A loud crowd can be wrong. A popular opinion can be wrong. Fear destroyed a whole nation, a whole generation. Not a sword, not an army. Fear. The people did not lose their future from lack of power. They lost it because of the voices they trusted. Let me bring this into our context, because sometimes people look at this Bible, they think of just spiritual things in heaven. Again, when you say spirit, it's an idea. Idea is a spirit. You can't touch an idea, right? Things become flesh. Everything you see around you was an idea in somebody's mind. It became flesh. We go on to use it. Everyone that followed the idea of Ambazonia has felt the impact. I'm not saying we shouldn't have an army, but let our cause be clear. Southern Cameroons, incomplete decolonization, was a nation and not a country. Clarity. The energy would have been different. Many people would have been on board to help us follow this case to the end. But they are not involved because there is no clarity, no leadership. Everyone that followed Ambazonia felt the impact. So the voice we heard directed our destiny. Ambazonia assumes a union existed. La République du Cameroon seceded from that union, whereas there is no union treaty to begin with. Hence, the name Ambazonia and the war we have been fighting for 9 years. Whereas we would have been fighting the war of incomplete decolonization. Why? Because there was no union treaty. We had no document to reference if we were marginalized in a relationship that was legal. So we've missed everything that we have on the side, on the Southern Cameroons. Our legitimate cause and the cause of all our problem, because there's no union treaty. And we are here assuming that there was a union treaty and La Republic changing the name from the United Republic of Cameroon to the Republic of Cameroon. And we say they seceded from a union. And so we pick up a fight because of that. And so the world is watching us in this game. The voice you listen to. Some go around and say, oh, we had our independence in 1961, La Republic marched into our nation. Sequencing. But let's go ahead and continue listening to Cho Ayaba. So, but the voice you listen to. And those who watch my video and don't comment, this is time, my people. It's okay to go back home, talk to your wife and your friends. We didn't get it right. It's okay. People make mistakes in life. It's okay. The assumption that there was a union that was dissolved, we had a lot of mixed up in this whole thing. Now we are gaining clarity through this brother. Share the video and tell them we made a mistake. This is the first step towards building a nation that will be filled with upright people. That we made a mistake. We ought to be clear about our status as Southern Cameroonians, that no union treaty exists. Because the case we will put against La Republic of Cameroon, it's going to be huge. And we are building that case fire. Yeah. So tell your friends, your loved ones, and your wife, this was really a blunder. Our young men will maintain their position on the ground. But we are fighting a different fight moving forward. It's okay to be wrong. Silicon Valley has the slogan, fail fast, for a reason. You try and then you know it won't work. I've run multiple businesses. Some have failed, some have worked. And it's okay. It's okay to fail. So let's go ahead and listen to Cho Ayaba, then we will dive in. But are you enjoying this? Yeah.
Remember, in the case of human rights violations, I explained that to be able to jump jurisdiction, let's say to take your case from the domestic to the international, you have to show cause that you've tried all methods from the lower courts, high courts, Supreme Court, and you have not been able to get justice. In the case of conflict, it is almost the same, but it's not a prerequisite to jump jurisdiction. But in the case of Ambazonia and Cameroon, I want to show cause. From 1961, Foncha, after the 11th of February and the 21st of April, Foncha tried to discuss with Cameroon following Resolution 1608, even without the premise of that resolution being fulfilled in terms of the presence of the United Kingdom and other parties. I have explained this one of my outings. Foncha tried, I think that was in the month of July, in discussions. Aijo simply brought in the Constitution of Cameroon, brought in French experts and others, and what Foncha were proposing were all just turned down. They engage. There is a principle in discussions which is very critical. It's the principle of good faith. When parties enter into agreements or sign treaties, they do so expecting that the parties to the treaty or to the contract or to the agreement will respect it. They do so expecting that those who negotiate, those who draft those who sign and then ratify do so with the intention of respecting it. Therefore, you have good faith. That is how international treaties function. Even though there are now instances of enforcement, there are remedial actions that can be taken by international bodies. You have arrest warrants now, you have confiscation of properties and things like that. But primarily, it is based on good faith. Cameroon has never been a good faith actor. What's the root cause? Occupation, violation of borders and independence, in violation of Articles 20, paragraph 1 to 4 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and Article 4 of the Constitutive Act of the African Union, including the Charter of the United Nations.
You see, my people, our leaders ramble around the truth. They go up, they come down, they go to this direction. I bring this so that we learn, we study. You see how I'll present the framework of this issue so you never miss it. Never miss it. Like Foncha and Aijo, Foncha had a conversation with Aijo, it didn't work. How do we go on to talk about treaties and we talk about good faith? Those are all good intentions. We should have that. We should have people's best interests at heart. I hear Ayabacho talk a lot about intent, and that is a good point. You should have good intentions, right? But at the same time, if there is no union treaty, we don't go on to talk about intentions. We articulate exactly where this individual violated that law by stating the UN's own law on that issue. And then we stay there. You see, we go to domestic jurisdiction, we try to dialogue with Paul Biya, we scream, we say we've tried and no one is hearing us. The world is watching us. I told you there are just about 195 countries in the world, 193 countries. The world understands Southern Cameroons. Our case is so good, better than that of Eritrea, better than that of South Sudan. Our case is so good. It's a case of something similar to that of Kuwait, the Baltic states, Lithuania. That is a classic example of what our case looks like. Do you understand? Now, let's go ahead and go through this, and then we'll bring in a PhD defense approach to this case to help the intellectuals in our community. And then we will go on to look at the petitions that have been filed at the UN and the issues with those petitions and why the world hasn't heard us till date. Let's
of aggression as a root cause. The root cause is not the consequences of the root cause.
Our leaders go around this case, get frustrated, and they are emotionally charged. That is a pattern that is consistent with everyone that represented us in this issue. We must be calm and deal with what we see before us with no emotions. Now let's listen to Molanjo Litube. He touched on some very important aspects of this case, but still, the fact that there is no union treaty, we don't even go further to say we had to exchange power based on a draft constitution. Law doesn't work like that. This means we had a tour on a house that you were looking at buying. Your wife, your children, they loved the house. They were going in, hoping that we will buy that house. The real estate agent is waiting that we go on to negotiate and sign so you can buy that house. And then you never sign the deed to that house. And then you just go get a U-Haul right? And then you start packing your things into that house. In the United States, you'll be arrested. Anywhere around the world, that is illegal. That is the situation with what is going on between Southern Cameroons and La Republic du Cameroon. So the plebiscite was that the interest to buy that house. The Fumban conference was the meeting with the real estate agent so you can take a tour and also negotiate on how you want to buy that house. But without signing the deed, without signing the contract, you can't move your things into that house. So when they use the word illegal occupation to a certain dimension, that makes sense because there was no contract. There is no one from La Republique du Cameroon who has signed a signature based on this union. So they go back and use German Cameroon and try to create some logic, brainwash their people. Because if Pobia is the smartest man in Cameroon, then you can understand what is going on. Brainwash the people, caution them not to talk about politics. Right? Before we even join them, they have maltreated their own people so bad, destroyed them. Now they are benefiting from the same independence. They destroyed the people that were fighting for that independence. The Omni Obey, the Roland Mumi, NS1D, they destroyed those people. So I said, you teach this kind of a human being. Don't just step back and think that they know or what they are doing in their right senses. They don't understand what they are doing. You bring them close and you teach them. So first, you must assume that position of a teacher to help bring this kind of human being out of ignorance. You don't put them in power. You step them down and then you teach them. And so every military officer that goes and surrenders their faith to support that, you teach them too because they are ignorant at the same time. That is why I said, no taxation without representation. Before you come over to Southern Cameroons, make sure you come along with a union treaty. Let La Republique du Cameroon, whether that individual come from among us, make sure you come along with a union treaty to show this union is legal. This is the first step for us black people rising above mediocrity to living in a civilized society. You teach them. Now, let's listen to Mola Njoli Tumbe.
That is the post which exercises ultimate authority. That if in one term the president comes from La Republique du Cameroon, the next term around the president should come from Southern Cameroon.
All right, you want a Southern Cameroonian to be the president of this country?
Yes, well, this ought to have been arranged as far back as 49 years ago. Throughout the association so-called with La Republique du Cameroon, we have never tasted executive power.
And that is your struggle now?
Yes. That
you have changed your struggle. Why? Initially, yes, you were going for...
Let me explain something for those who said Mola Njoli Tumbe said there was no union treaty. This is what you should understand. When I say there is no union treaty, I don't go on to talk about the terms we had in the draft constitution. Do you understand? This is how you will win. If not, take that idea the way you've been sharing around and continue. You stop here. Again, I'm bringing a mathematical formula into this so that there is no debate anywhere on this subject moving forward. Let me tell you, okay, if you did not end up signing that contract to buy that house, you can't go on to be discussing the terms inside that contract as a base as to why you should move your things into that house or how that relationship between you and the real estate agent should be because you move your things inside that house. We don't even get there. We know this in basic life. This is something we should understand. So when people hear you speak, children are listening, adults are listening, the people in the community are listening. they will go on to share what they are listening to with their friends. What are they going to say? That is why you see I'm very, very particular about our public opinion, public perception. This all by itself helps you win a case even before we even get there. So everything I'm doing here is intentional, so that we are clarifying even citizens of La République du Cameroon on this issue. And we are letting them know we are upright people, even our own leaders. If they are not presenting our story properly, we let the world know this is what they were saying, this is where they missed it. We are different from this corrupt regime that you guys have built, and you are trying to get us yoked to this. That is what I'm doing here. We just set the record straight. You see, you know why the Bible is trusted? Because the Israelites, they don't even hide their flaws of their leaders and the decisions they made at critical moments in Israel's history. They tell you Moses struck the rock with anger, and that brought pain upon the land. And with that, God told Moses, you will not enter the promised land. They don't bury that. That is why this book is trusted. They don't tell you in there that, David was just a cool, nice man and never heard a fly. They say, no, David took a wife of someone and God punished him for that and still restored him and called him a man after his own heart. They don't hide it from you that Moses killed an Egyptian when he was young. They tell you that even though Moses did that, God still brought him back and say, you will free our people out of Egypt. That is why that book is credible. And it's not from Europe. Some people thought maybe the Bible came from Europe. No, it came from the Middle East. Some want to debate that the Egyptians or the Israelites were black people. That is a conversation for another time. But I'm looking at the characters to help you understand the authenticity of this work. And that is why we will win. There will be no nation in the continent of Africa that will come close to us. Southern Cameroons will be a miracle in this dispensation. Let's get it right, my people. We are going somewhere. Do you understand?
Secession, independence of Southern Cameroons. Now you are looking for recognition.
No. My position has not changed one bit. Because having a grievance, you go to a tribunal to settle differences of opinion. So Southern Cameroonians went to the African Commission and said that our rights are being trampled upon by La République du Cameroon.
Do you hear where they went to? To the African Union. That is not the proper jurisdiction. So you can have a good case. Imagine you are a Christian and you have spiritual attacks, and then you take your issue to Allah. You're a Christian. You should take your problem to Jesus. You get it? Always, all the time. If you are a Christian, if you are a Muslim, take your problems to Allah. If you are a Muslim, take your problem to Allah. If you are a traditionalist, take your problems to Baba. It's that simple. Jurisdiction. That is why the Roman centurion told Jesus, I'm a man under authority myself. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. I'm not worthy of you coming to my house. A centurion, this is somebody that is a commander that has at least 100 people that he is leading. He told Jesus that I understand jurisdiction, I understand power. I'm a man under authority myself. I know how this thing works. Jurisdiction. It works even in the spiritual realm, in the physical realm. These are principles in this world. If you don't understand it, my brother, you will struggle. You will scream for 1,000 years and no one will come to your aid. I know what I'm talking about on this subject of jurisdiction. Just with our people having clarity on this, their energy towards finding their freedom will change forever. What they will teach their children will change forever with this depth of clarity.
That international tribunal has ruled that La République du Cameroon should enter into constructive dialogue with Southern Cameroonians.
Every international tribunal that you go to besides the UK or the United Nations, they will tell you to go dialogue all the time. You don't understand why that proposition of dialogue keeps coming on the table. It's because of the way we framed our case, the places we went to, the jurisdiction we went to. They will tell you dialogue, peace, understanding on a situation that La République would have been summoned, and they even get to pay us reparation for 65 years, extending their administration into a UN trust territory without documentation, without a signed union treaty. It's illegal according to international law.
In particular, SCNC and SCAPO, in order to arrange to corrective action which is constitutional.
And then...
Now, did you hear that? Each and every one of our leaders, on every video, have said the same thing. The assumption in their mode of conversation indicates a union treaty existed. And so they go into some of the clauses or the terms in that draft constitution to explain how we were cheated. We've heard our leaders say, oh, we trusted too much. No. A union treaty doesn't exist. We stop there. We frame a completely different case. This is law. That is why the English system works. That's why I tell you, learn to speak English every day. Because when you understand this language, it's not just the language. There are many opportunities that come with this language. There are many benefits that comes with English, and you haven't utilized it yet. At least let's benefit something out of this colonial impact. Let's listen to this learned scholar from our community, and then I'll make a PhD defense of this case briefly, and then we'll move on to look at what our leaders have been presenting before the UN. Let's take a listen.
Later on October 1, 1961, when Nigeria was getting its independence, the English-speaking part of Cameroon, which at the time was called Southern Cameroons, was given the possibility to elect to either become independent as part of Nigeria or to rejoin the French-speaking part of Cameroon, which had already obtained its independence on the 1st of January 1960. It was a competitive electoral process, and the majority of Anglophone Cameroonians within Southern Cameroons elected to join the French Cameroon, which by that time had already obtained its independence as the Republic of Cameroon. And through that plebiscite decision, as the two parts of Cameroon came together, they've agreed to form what was called the Federal Republic of Cameroon, having gone through talks between the two parts in Fumban to come out with the Federal Republic of Cameroon in 1961, with a constitution that said that the cultural identities of both sides would be respected, and the federal nature of the country will never be changed in future constitutions. In 1972, 11 years later, there was a political transformation in the country where the constitution was changed and the country moved from being the Federal Republic of Cameroon to become the United Republic of Cameroon.
English Cameroon.
That is how most of our leaders tell this story. Everywhere they went, that is our story. When someone speaks like this, instantly I know the only way you can seek change is through Ambazonia. That indicates you assume a union treaty existed by the way you frame that story. Now, people, your story and how you tell your story defines you in this war. Not understanding your story, you will create a different narrative. And the world is waiting for you to open your mouth and tell your story. That is what independence is all about. The UN will not do that for you. If they have to do everything for you, then you are still dependent. You are not independent. If they had to supervise, it is your responsibility to let them know. Most of us don't read contracts. We just sign. Just sign contracts. You don't even take time to study contracts. And some of those contracts have messed up your lives. Is that true? How many of you take the time to read all the contracts that you sign? You just say, yeah, I just want to sign. And some of it, you're giving your freedom away and you don't know what you're doing. Now, this is what I want you to understand. If you listen to another leader from our community, the same narrative, the same structure. For 65 years, we've been mixing up the story, right? Tell one part of the story, tell another part of the story. There is no union treaty, and then we go on to explain what that constitution said and how that constitution was violated. Simplicity. Now, if a PhD student, for the learned individuals in our community, but the average individual, you understand this, because remember, my goal is to teach and make this so easy that you never miss it. If a PhD student submits a thesis full of anger, emotion, and personal stories without citing primary documents, I told you that is why I had a struggle with that paper on behavioral finance. Without citing primary documents, the committee throws it out. They know this, the intellectuals in our community, you know this. Not because the suffering isn't real, but because it's not academically defensible. So they throw out your thesis when you're defending your PhD, not because the stories that you put in there, the suffering, the pain that our people are going through isn't real, but because it is not academically defensible. The wall again works on structure. You see, over 83% of black people in America are part of the Democratic Party in this country. The same parties that bring in the gay, the lesbianism that you don't want in Africa. Most of the black people in this country, 83%, are part of that party. And then when you turn around to explain about these ills, you always say that white man thing, not knowing 83% of your people in this country are part of a political party that promotes such behaviors. And the white folks that you think they are the ones bringing about those practices in Africa are all part of the Republican Party. Isn't it sad? That is a reality. Now, that is exactly what has happened to Southern Cameroons for 60 plus years. We bring in a little bit of facts about our story. Yeah, the plebiscite, we go on and we explain the plebiscite. The resolution 1608, we don't expatiate in depthly on how that piece of document was not instituted, which that is where our bread and butter is. La République du Cameroon, hearing what I'm saying here, they will start panicking, and we haven't even started. Because they translate most of the things that happen in the English world to understand in the Francophone world. Because English runs this world. We haven't even started, but if they understand what I'm sharing here, panic will start more than anything that you've ever tried with them. So we kept telling the world, they killed us, they oppressed us, we are suffering. It's all true. But nothing you can cite as a legal base for statehood, trusteeship, or international intervention. So in academic terms, we submit a thesis with the PhD students or the PhD holders in our community with no primary document, no legal citations, no jurisdictional grounding, no proof of legal identity being claimed, and a name, Ambazonia, that does not appear in any UN archive. A PhD committee would fail that thesis instantly. So did the war. So did the UN. What a PhD level submission looks like once you present UN Resolution 1608, Article 76B, look at the sequence. So I stopped after the plebiscite, I picked this document and I outlined 76B of the UN Charter, Article 102, which required that a treaty be ratified, signed, and registered at the UN. The trusteeship council records, the absence of a union treaty, the UN map where Southern Cameroons is still listed separately. Our people have touched fragments of this. But you see, when Jesus came, the goal was that he helps you understand everything. And when they were asking Jesus Christ, which of these commandments is the greatest of all? The laws were too much. Oh, we have this, we have that. All he had to do was tell them, if you love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as you love yourself, that is the greatest command. He made it easy. Do you understand? Now, so the resolution 1608, Article 76B of the UN Charter, Article 102, the registration of the treaty, trusteeship council records, the absence of a union treaty, the UN map where Southern Cameroons is still listed separately till today. Till today, Southern Cameroons. And we have been fighting using a name called Ambazonia. I understand the emotion behind Ambazonia. We wanted to be different. We didn't just want anything with the name Cameroon on it. I understand that. But we will never win with that strategy. So we've moved this entire case from emotion to citation. Let me explain that to the PhD students so they understand. We've moved from emotion to citation. From activism to international law. Structure. That teacher wanted me to organize my work a certain way. Imagine you had a document to deposit in the linguistics department at the University of Boya because you don't understand the depth of that problem. So you didn't frame it properly. And so you probably dropped it anywhere you felt at the University of Boya. The linguistic department that handles your issue will never get to see that document. And you go back and be hoping that someone will come hear you. That is what has been happening since 1995 with us. Okay, we'll get into that. So, why this changes everything? When the identity changes from Ambazonia, which is unsighted, to Southern Cameroons, fully sighted, the world no longer sees a rebel group. That is what I've done with us. Now, they see a UN recognized trust territory whose decolonization was not completed, whose union was never ratified, whose sovereignty was never transferred. At that point, the burden shifts, not on us, on La République du Cameroun. Exactly the way a doctoral candidate must defend their claim. La République du Cameroun must now defend theirs. They must show that the Union Treaty exists. They must show the ratification, show the UN registration, show the deposition under Article 102. This is how we change the world. They can't. This is why clarity is power. When you hear of a PhD student, a PhD holder, this is the process they go through, and their case cannot be refuted by any counsel. Do you understand what I'm saying, my people? The Southern Cameroons question was never a complicated political struggle. It was a badly presented legal file. Let me repeat that again. The Southern Cameroons question was never a complicated political struggle. That means many people that have died ought not to die. They would have enrolled to build an army for this country if this case was framed properly. It was a badly presented legal file. Emotion made the world confused. That is why you must tame your anger and calm down in a situation like this. And that is what I do. When I come online, sometimes we are charged, but I want to let you know my emotions are under control. Everything that I'm saying is factual. If you have the energy, don't dim it, but be factual. Citation forces the world to acknowledge the truth. That is why your PhD defense goes through and you end up with a certificate. Because of citation. Do you understand? Now, let's go into some of the case files that have been deposited at the UN about Southern Cameroons. My people, let me say this. My heart is heavy. Most of our leaders since 1995, I told you, I shared some of the highlights of what Foncha said at the UN because he was representing Southern Cameroons. I will not disclose the organizations and the names of the individuals. We are building a nation that will become a country, and we have to be responsible. So I will share the year and what the organization deposited at the UN, but I won't share the names of the individuals. But since 1995, our file has not been structured properly, and it has never reached the right department at the UN. Just like going to the University of Boya, and there was a case file that was supposed to reach the linguistics department, and you just deposit it anywhere at the University of Boya, you'll never get feedback. The world is waiting for you to demonstrate that status of independence. That will be the first step towards showing the world that we can govern ourselves. Can we follow the law and speak to the right department with clarity and frameworks and citation that helps us rise above the noise in Africa? I will start with number one. Between 1995 and 2000s, a petition was deposited at the UN. The focus was academic and legal analysis of the 1961 Union, trusteeship and annexation. The status, incomplete. No Article 102, no 76B filing. Number two, in the year 1997 and 2003, another petition was filed in the UN. Those individuals know themselves, as I'm outlining some of the major points in that petition that they filed. The focus was collapse of the federation, constitutional violation, and autonomy issues. Right? Oh, they are dominating us. Status, wrong department. So they assumed a union existed, no treaty verification. They tried their best. Don't get me wrong. I don't want us to pick up a fight with anybody here. We'll make progress moving forward. Number three, between 2017 and 2020, another petition was filed at the UN. The focus, Anglophone crisis, killings, arrest, torture, displacement. The status, irrelevant. Humanitarian bodies cannot decide sovereignty. And that is why they come back and tell you, go dialogue with Orbia. We'll see what to do. So the case was not fully structured. All the citations required to bring down this Goliath was not outlined. And so the world cannot act. And we come on social media and we insult the UN, we insult other nations that are part of that UN, when we haven't done our own part and make sure we did everything that we should do, that is required to do, and then we say, oh, we've tried. After we are done with this, my brother, when we come up with the exact mathematical equation the bottom of our problem, and the world ignores us. And then we'll take this to the next level. Number 4, in 2017 and 2019, another petition was filed at the UN. I will not call the names. I told you I won't call the names of the individuals and their organization. I protect their identity for the purpose. The focus was on war crimes, crimes against humanity, and state violence. The status irrelevant for our case. Those bodies handle abuses, not territorial status or treaty laws. So they will treat it as an internal conflict. Case dismissed. Now, number 5, in 2005 and 2015, another petition was filed at the UN. The focus, historical documentation of marginalization. So, historical documentation of marginalization, the status incomplete. The individuals, when I say incomplete, that means they tried, but it was incomplete. And why? Good history, the individual did good, but did not file in the right department. And it wasn't complete. Marginalization. That's not what we are dealing with here. And the last, number 6. Another petition was filed in 2017 and 2021. I think that should be the last one. The focus was the legal argument that sovereignty cannot transfer without a treaty. The status incomplete plus wrong department. My people, from 1995, beginning with Fonja, right up to 2021, none of our leaders have had the exact framework I outlined to you and have filed in the right department to handle our case in the Southern Cameroons. For 40 years, the world has not heard exactly what is going on with us. Now, we'll listen some more and I'll give you a hint. I told you, I promise you, I'll give you a hint of how this legal case is going to look like. This is going to be amazing. My people, we are English-speaking people. Things like this should be easy for us. We should end this case smiling while rebuilding. We put behind us everything we've gone through, learn, and then build proper institutions moving forward. Let's not let our pain define us, but we learn and then we make progress. So we'll listen some more and then I'll give you a hint of how this battle will look like. So you start getting ready. Let's take a listen.
The country moved from being the Federal Republic of Cameroon to become the United Republic of Cameroon.
English Cameroon was supposed to have its own independence, but there were only 2 options. Either you have your independence by joining Nigeria, which is also an English-speaking country, or you have your independence by joining the Republic of Cameroon, which is French. So because the English side had had a very bad experience in Nigeria, they walked out of the Nigerian parliament and then formed their own state. So we felt that it was but good to have a union with French Cameroon, and that union was actually cemented under the foundation and the understanding to make a federal state. With and the symbolism was very clear, and the flag was green, red, yellow with two stars, two equal stars representing the two countries. So since when that happened, and it is worthwhile mentioning that the French Cameroon is 80% of the population, and then the English Cameroon is only 20% of the population. And economically,
we don't even get into that. Hear what he says. Immediately we go into emotionally charged part of our conversation. I'm off already. And this is what will happen when you go before diplomats. They will listen, pay attention, but immediately you go into those emotions. Have those conversations in the community. Be factual. Let's keep listening.
Most of the English Cameroon actually contributes almost 66% of the national GDP.
Again, a country was not formed out of these two nations. It wasn't formed. You will never ever in this world create a country without a union treaty. Two nations coming together, not two countries, two nations coming together cannot create one country without a union treaty. It doesn't exist. By the time I'm done with this case, if this doesn't work, the entire system built on English collapses. That means America is a lie. The United Nations is a lie. Nigeria, a country built on this same foundation of the English culture, collapses if this case is false. Then everything that I've believed my entire life is a lie. Then it's a lie that science, technology, diplomacy, trade, 200 million plus Chinese people studying English so that they can be part of this global system. It's all lies. My people, those who want to be something, want to be leaders, there will be many departments in this country that we are building. This fight is not the main thing. We are going on to build a country. And in that country, we will have people that will be experts in different departments, and we will all celebrate you. There is nothing to be fighting over this. There's a lot. You'll be probably number one in law. You'll be number one in agriculture. You'll be number one in technology. You'll be number one in different departments. That is what makes a country function, when people have different gifts. So don't worry. We will put you on the limelight and tell you you are the best, if that is what you are worried about. I've never heard in the history of Southern Cameroons a leader use the right framework to outline everything that we are going through. Starting with the name Southern Cameroons, our legal identity, move on to the plebiscite, Resolution 1608, stay there and not dive into all the terms in the draft constitution. I've not heard that in the history of the Southern Cameroons. And then go on to expand on Article 76B, Article 102, and the Trusteeship Council obligation. And remain there and have a good time around there. And that is what I'll be doing moving forward. We don't get into the federal system of government. We don't get into the dissolving of, we don't go into all the flags, the stars, the symbols, and all of that, the GDP of the country and all of that. We don't even get there. We stay around here. I've not seen any leader follow this pattern and just remain there. This is our bread and butter. This is where the world gets to hear us. How did you move into creating a government, Ijo, without signing a union treaty? How? How did you go on to have administrators giving laws over Southern Cameroons without a signed union treaty? The government of La République du Cameroon has to answer that question. Get everyone in La République du Cameroon in the army, but you will answer this question. Enforce your BIR. Bring experts from everywhere around the world, but this one question, you will have to answer this question. Let me take you into a hint of how this case file look like. What we are building against La République du Cameroon. La République acted in bad faith and violated international law. They didn't just act in bad faith by deceiving us in the union. They acted in a bad faith by violating international law. So a refusal of the tripartite conference, La République refused to properly negotiate the terms of union as required by Resolution 1608. B, unilateral extension of sovereignty. Instead of negotiation, La République du Cameroon unilaterally extended administration into Southern Cameroons, took over institutions, imposed laws and systems, later abolished the federation without consent in 1972. They renamed itself, that was their name, they renamed themselves, La République du Cameroon in 1984. This is the textbook breach of international legal order. Now, C, violation of Article 102. La République pretended to have a union but never registered any treaty because none existed. This alone invalidates its entire claim over Southern Cameroons. La République has no jurisdiction over Southern Cameroons. Why? Because a state cannot exercise sovereignty over a territory unless through a treaty or through a UN supervised decolonization process. Neither occurred. Don't blame the UN. Nothing exists. If La République played a game with the UN, it would have been there. It doesn't exist. Therefore, La République's presence in Southern Cameroon is unlawful occupation. The UN failed to perform the mandatory checkups. That is where we blame the UN. After 1608, the UN was required to verify the existence of a treaty, confirm ratification, check compliance, certify decolonization as complete. The UN failed to verify any of the steps. That is where we go on to put some burden on the UN. Because the UN did not certify completion, the trust territory remains legally unresolved. Do you see how I bring in the UN? And how we tie everything back together? Not to create a blame game narrative that at the end of the day takes us nowhere. Now, Southern Cameroons therefore remain a distinct international entity based on the lack of a union treaty, failure of the mandated UN process, continued recognition of the territory in UN records, of which it's in there. The 1984 self-restoration of La République to its pre-1961 borders is another classic proof that Southern Cameroons remains a distinct international entity. So a UN recognized but incomplete trust territory whose sovereignty was never transferred. And then this is where everything explodes. Since the burden of proof is on La République du Cameroun, we are not just suing La République du Cameroun or bringing this case before the international community about La République du Cameroun just so they leave us alone. 65 years? And you think it's just to leave us alone? We will forgive some people. But this is not a case against the people of La République du Cameroun. It's against the government, but it will affect the people in one way or another. Those who are connected to that system. So we are also adding in this petition, based on where we will file this case, liability and damages against La République du Cameroun. You will all agree that Southern Cameroons need reconstruction. There are mothers that don't have husbands anymore. Children that will grow up without a father. Some in jail that have lost time. Trauma in many communities that we have to deal with. But we have to be humble and calm in this process. So, because La République extended its administration without legal authority, it is liable for 65 years of illegal administration, economic exploitation, human rights abuses, destruction of infrastructure, displacement and deaths. We have thousands of our people displaced across the world because they did not sign a union treaty and they thought they could get an army. You see, I told you all these archaic systems some governments in Africa run, it will get them into trouble. And it is time to set the record straight. And this example, again, it will be a case study that will be studied across universities across the world once we are done with this case. Loss of revenue and resources, that is what we add in this petition. Under international law, an unlawful occupying power owes reparation. Let me repeat that again. Under international law, an unlawful occupying power owes reparation, restitution for damages. This is all what goes into this petition. Why? Because after they will fail the burden of proof, which is entirely on La République du Cameroun, and this is what we have done in the Southern Cameroons for the past 65 years. We've been trying to justify, confuse the history, confuse the story, try to prove or dialogue with La République du Cameroun. No, they will want to dialogue with us. And we will say, no, you will dialogue in the right place, not with us. We don't have anything to dialogue with La République du Cameroun. So they must produce a union treaty, ratification documents, Article 102 registration, and UN confirmation of decolonization. I repeat that again. So the burden of proof is on La République du Cameroon. Let me say calm so we don't miss it. They must produce these documents without reasonable doubt: a union treaty, ratification documents, Article 102 registration, UN confirmation of decolonization. So if they cannot produce what international law requires, the case they have claiming ownership of Southern Cameroons collapses. And that is where everything ends. But I just wanted to bring in a hint of what will go in to this petition. I'll leave you with this, my people. You see, when you look at human nature across time, some of our people are working for that government. Some, you call them blackleg. Some are called terrorists. What I want you to understand is human beings always gravitate towards safety. There are millions of our people today that once everything is clear, they will run away from that La République government, change their language, and come over to this side. So we understand. When people say, oh no, La République government, they say that with their mouth because human beings will always gravitate towards safety, what is predictable, and they will say all sorts of things to justify why they find themselves in there. But all that will change very soon. There are some people we will have to forgive. We'll have to forgive some people. So I want you to bear that in mind. Even those who feel frustrated, that's what happens when a society is in this stage. But many will change their mind. Even those who have never said a word since this crisis started will begin to say something. Now, based on everything that I've shared with you, under this video, I want you guys to be summarizing these points because this is the story you get to teach your children. You explain that plebiscite, summarize it in the comment section. I explain this to you because remember, life and death is in the power of the tongue. At least if you can't speak, you can write. The 10 spies came back with a bad report, and those who listened perished. Only Caleb and Joshua made it into the promised land. So being passive is not an option. You have to be involved. This is how we build a country. Summarize in the comment section. Don't just watch. Share the video, but also summarize what you understand in the comment section. The plebiscite happened. That was interest in joining. The Fumban was designed to be a negotiation conference. They ought to have tripartite conferences, which none is recorded. Resolution 1608 outlined how this union will be formed. Under 102, the documents were supposed to be signed, that is a union treaty, ratified and registered at the UN. And none of that happened. So 76B gives us a legal path on how to complete that process. So it is incomplete decolonization. We were a nation, but not a country. So we start communicating in this new language. It was two nations that came together, not two countries. A country must have an army and be able to negotiate foreign affairs. Southern Cameroons didn't have that because we were a UN trust territory under British administration. And that is why Britain has to come into this now. Make sure you leverage everything around this case and follow it the right way. When you present it wrongly, Britain steps out, the UN steps out, we remain all by ourselves. Do you understand? There is no one in La République du Cameroun that has a signature on a paper that we joined them. So with that, it is an illegal extension of their administration into a UN trust territory without the UN's approval for 65 years. This is the gospel truth about our problem. No federation, we don't even get into that. Stars, flags, ID cards, birth certificate, we don't even go into that. That is why you have no foundation to stand on as a Southern Cameroonian, because there was no union treaty. That is the gospel truth. When we sign a document, at least there's something we can go look at, even when the changes are happening. Or something we can fall back to if the changes we are making doesn't serve the interests of the people. Everything becomes speculation. There was no union treaty. We remain there. And that is why we are here, honorable members of the UN. My fellow Southern Cameroonians, that is why we are here today. Fellow citizens of La République du Cameroon, that is the case between Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroon. I rest my case.
I usually promised that we were coming back to fix the date. We were coming back in August to read and sign. And that was going to precede the legalization of the draft constitution. So the very August, I had to go back to him and remind him about the resumed constitution. When he did not answer me, in September, I reminded him. But unfortunately, on 1st of October, I used the draft to declare federation and unification. Cadre of the KNDPA and tried to scatter all and made some other laws, which would make him the supreme president.